Just giving a brief synopsis on the Gemara where we had an argument, Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim, if a girl who's a naira, 12, between 12 and 12 and a half, who just got engaged, and the husband-to-be wants to divorce her, whether she can receive her own get. According to the Rabbanan, yes, she can. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can, because the father is a solely in control. And then we had an argument, according to Chachamim, is Kiddushin the same thing, that according to the Shlakish, Kiddushin also she can receive it, and according to the Rabbi Yehuda, you can't. And we want to know what's the difference in Kiddushin and Gittin. Why Gittin, according to Rabbi Yechanan, she cannot, in the Rabbanon, she cannot receive it herself. Sorry, by Gittin she could receive it, by Kiddushin she can't. So the Gemara concludes, because by Kiddushin she's leaving her father's control, and therefore she needs her father's consent, so she cannot accept the Kiddushin. When it comes to Gittin, she's actually returning home, and therefore you don't need your father's consent. So how come by Yavama we learned by Maimer that if, let's say, her husband died, now she has to marry one of her brothers-in-law, one of them gives her Kiddushin, which you call Maimer, it's only Rabbanon, they can do it even without the father's consent. So we explained that over there, she's already bound to one of the brothers-in-law. There's a zika, and therefore it's not the question of taking away from the father's control. It was already gone from the father's control, so therefore it is effective. So now the Gemara continues. We're on Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, and we're halfway down the page. And the Gemara starts with Tanan. The last line is Tanan. It's 3 lines above the middle of the page. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah as follows. We actually learned it in the beginning of this parak. It says, we're going to ask a question on Rish Lakish. It says that a person has the right to Mekadosh his daughter, Kishehi Naira, when she is a Naira, boy, ubishluchai. It says in Mekadosh his daughter, boy, ubishluchai, that either he can do it or he can send an agent. It says clearly that in that role only says regarding him. Doesn't mention that, boy, v'shluchai but doesn't say ba ubishlucha, that she can receive it or her shliach. So clearly, from maybe say that what? It seems from here clearly like that she cannot receive her own Kiddushin. A question tiyufta dish lakish, not just a question, it's a tiyufta. Tiyufta is much stronger than just a kasha. So this is a strong question. It's clearly from here that only the father, the girl, has no right to accept her own Kiddushin, like Rabbi Yechanan learned. Amalach rish lakish, not a question. I will say that the author of this Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Hanam Rabbi Yehudi. The Mishnah here is Rabbi Yehuda. And if you remember, Rabbi Yehuda says that even by Gittin, she cannot receive her own get. You can't have two people overlapping control. One person is in control, and that's it. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda holds when it comes to Gittin, she cannot receive her own get. The same thing by Kiddushin, she cannot receive her own Kiddushin. But if you follow the Rabbanon who say that by Gittin you could, same thing applies to Kiddushin. Same thing applies. Says the Gemara. How can you tell me that this goes according to Rabbi Yehuda? Say for the next Mishnah, which we'll learn in a few pages. There it says, if a man says to a woman, you should be engaged to me with this date, and then he uses the same expression again, because he used the word hiskachi, started as a preamble to every time he said this date, it's like a separate Kiddushin. And why is that important? If each date is only worth a half a pruta, if you combine the two, it's a full pruta. But because he separated them by saying it's kachi betam razu, each one is okay. This date. If it doesn't work, let's try to start again. But in order to separate it, you have to have the full sentence every time. In other words, if he would have said it's kachi betam razu, then you would do the aggregate. So who is the author of that opinion? You're telling me some Rabbi Yehuda. Let's this time mission Rabbi Yehuda. Let's see if Rabbi Yehuda agrees with that concept, because we actually have a similar argument where a person, 5 people come over to the person and say, we gave you something to mind for us. Each one individually says he gave. And the din is, if you swear that no, you didn't, and turn out then you're made that you lied, then you have a whole din over there, shut because he has to compensate for each shvuah. But when is it considered like 5 different, they all came together, these 5 people. Is it considered 5 different shavuos, and therefore he has to, penalize 5 different times? Or is it one shavuot and he only made one lie here? So it depends on the wording, how he said it. If he said shavuot loylazu, shavuot loylazu, shavuot loylazu, then obviously it's 5 separate ones. But what happened? He said shavuot loylazu, 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 loylazu. How do we view that? So the Gemara therefore says as follows. We say, Mantana, who's the author of this part of the Mishnah? We says, Iskachi, the only way that you separate the two is by Iskachi. The only one who says that you need full sentences to separate them is Rab Shimon. Not the Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Shimon. What's the story? The Amar, he says that the only time that when you talk to five people, it's as if it's five different shvuas, as if he starts off each sentence, no, I swear you never gave me. And then turns to the next person, I swear you never gave me. Five different shvuas. What's the problem? Why can't the Mishnah be Rabbi Yehuda like Shlokish insists, and therefore she has no hand even by Gittin? Or practice of Rabbi Shimon, when it comes to breaking things up, he holds like he agrees with Rabbi Shimon. That's, you have to say sketchy each a full sentence. Can't be. Because in Misavilokum, that very argument of you doesn't agree with Rabbi Shimon. But Tanya, we learned, Klal, this is the rules that Meir holds, Klal ein echai achas. If you sort of put them all together, it's considered one shvua. Prat chayiv kalach achas. And if you make a prat, and the Gemara explains what a Meir's opinion is, not to get here, different Meir. Rabbi Yehuda, what we want to focus on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, shvua, if he says, loy loch, without above chayiv kol achas v'achas. He says that if you say loy loch so he says that I have loy loch v'loy loch. He says Shmuel, I don't know you. Then chayiv, you are chayiv on each one. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you, without saying the word shvu again and repeating it, as long as you say loy loch, v'loy loch, you say and this, it's like, and you're taking the shvu and you're carrying it over. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, what would be the din in the case of a tamra? If he says, kitcha, if he would say, skachli betamrazu, vitamrazu, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it would be considered two different, it would be also considered kedushin. Why does the Mishnah say the only time we separate them as two different kedushin is if he said twice skachi? Obviously, it's not Rabbi Yehuda on Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer says, no, if you make it a vav, it's like one long sentence. Rabbi Lezer says, loy loch, without a ma'aser. That's when we say each one is separate. But if you would have added a conjunctional and, then it's like one long, it's one shvua on all five, and then it's only one shvua. Rabbi Shimon says, okay, so we see we're clear that what? That our Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda argues on the same. You want to say you're right. Really, Rabbi Shimon, call Rabbi Shimon, it's all Rabbi Shimon. Uveshlichus all Rabbi Yehuda, all the way around. The author of Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, but he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that this is how the Shlokers will learn. He agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that the Naira has no hand whatsoever. Says the Gemara, Rabasi one day, Rabasi didn't go to yeshiva to learn. With Rabbi Yechanan's yeshiva, he was to Rabbi Yechanan, Ashkel Rabbi Zeda, he encountered Rabbi Zeda after Rabbi Zeda ran to Yisrael. Amalei, my Amar Ha'id Lebei Medrash, news of what was said in the base of Medrash. Amalei, he said, I also didn't go to yeshiva. Look at all these people playing hooky. I didn't go to yeshiva today either. Rab Oven Udayil. There's another Amar, Rab Oven. He was there. And I asked him what happened in yeshiva today, and he told me Chavrusa Kula, that all the Chavedim there in the yeshiva were there, and Rabbi Yechanan, they all decided to paskin like Rabbi Yechanan that a girl does not have a hand when it comes to Kiddushin, even though she might have a hand when it comes to Gittin. Look at the Gemara's expression there. The Tzavach Reish Lakish Kikruchya. Reish Lakish began to screech like a bird, a certain bird, some kind of bird. And this is what he said. The Yotzav Haisa. It says clearly in the Torah that we equate Kiddushin to Gittin. She left her husband and went to another one. So if the din is by according to by Gittin, the girl has a hand, so too when it comes to Kiddushin, the girl has a hand. The Leket Ashman, and they just ignored him. No, but they hold that in certain things, yes, we agree with you that you compare the two, and we don't. Rabbi said, Basamchu. Amalei said to him, Rabbi Basamchu, can we trust Rabbi? Maybe we forgot. Actually, we had a few Gemaras where two Amoraim argued. We said, well, this Amoraim is much more careful to make sure he gets everything 100% right. So can we trust Rabbi? Amalei in this case, definitely yes. Why? It's like a fish jumps straight out of you caught a fish and you jump straight into the frying pan. I got him as soon as he walked out of the base of Medrash, so he couldn't have made a mistake. Taisa learns it's like two different cities, but they're so close to each other. He wouldn't make up the story because he knows that the Talmidim travel back and forth. They right away check out what he says. There were two Rabbavins in the class. One was called Rabbavin, the son of Chia. One was called Kana. I heard Rabbavin was the student, but I don't know which one it is. El Rabbavin Stam. So who cares? We need to know his father's name. He said, you know what? If you ever contradict himself, you have to know whether he's contradicting or not. What's that? Exactly. Rav asked Rav Nachman a question based on what we just said. Yeah, so he asked the question. Neither, according to the Rabbanim, that say that she can receive her get, but she cannot receive her kedushin. So my question is, Naida Mao Shatasa Shliach Lekabel Gita Miyad Baila. Can the girl appoint a shliach? How powerful is her hand? So first thing your mother thinks the question is not based on how powerful. The question is, what is the role of the hand? Do we say Kiyada via dummy? Is she like an extension of a father? She's the hand of a father? In other words, the girl, even the Rabbanu say the girl can collect the get, it's not because she's an independent woman and she can collect the get. She is acting on behalf of the father. The father can take it himself or he can take it via his daughter, because she's the one at the end of the day who's being affected by the get. So she is an extension of the father. But what extension? Is she the hand of the father? She's like the courtyard of her father. It might not come in. If the father, if she's an extension of the father, just like the father can make a shliach, so can she. Or she's like the courtyard of the father. And what's so what? And then by a courtyard, we know you're not your chutz is not kohen unless it's sitting in the chutz. In other words, she cannot appoint a shliach. She has to wait till the get is inside her hand. And she's not divorced until the get arrives at her hand. Says the Gemara, did Rava have this question? Oh, my Rava, didn't Rava say, if it's a chotzer, it's not so simple. We said what he said. Kasav get. Let's say the husband wrote a get, and he placed the get in the hand of her servant. She had her own servant, and he placed it in the servant's hand, and Yashin. Now her servant is like her chotzer, and the servant is asleep. Umishmartoi. And if being guarded, being watched, so it's called a chotzer hamishtameres. How does it get? That's a valid get. Neir, if the servant wakes up, and he gets not a valid get. But now neir, I might get. If the servant wakes up, why isn't it get? Because the havich chotzer mishtameres lo yadaita. It's a guarded chotzer. The Eved can watch, mind it, but it's not working for her. Now the yeah. If he's awake, then he is minding the get. The only time a chutzah works for you, maybe you had before, is you have to stand next to it or you have free control. The Eved last time had to be tied up and asleep. In other words, if the Eved, who's independent, has an independent mind, is minding the get, then he's no longer buckled to you to the extent to be considered your chutzah. When is a chutzah your yard considered your yard? But it's still when he's minding the thing. Not talking about kinyan now. So when he's minding the thing, it's not a chutzim shtameres to you. And one of the rules of a chutzah is that it has to be completely protected for you. You have a gate around the chutzah. An open chutzah doesn't work. You have to have a gate around the chutzah, so it's shtameres. If anybody can walk in, so on and so forth, the Rebbe can take it. Or he's the one who's minding it. So it's not the chutzah is not bottled to you to the extent that you can say you're watching it, he's watching it. So now the question follows: even if she receives the get in her hand, so she's a chutzah, but since it's not being minded by the husband, because remember he's saying that it has to be his chutzah, then she's not koine. If the hand is considered the father's chutzah, the girl is considered the father's. Maybe the girl, not the wife. If the girl is considered the father's chutzah, it has to then be minded by the father. It doesn't help that it's minded by the girl, because then that's not mishtameres ledaitoi. Even if the get arrives in her hand, she shouldn't be divorced. It's being minded, but not by the father. So obviously, she cannot be considered the courtyard, the yard of her father, the court of her father. She's the hand of her father. She's the hand of the father. What's a shaila? Then just like the father can make a get, so can appoint a shliach, so can she. There's no question. You're right. She is the hand of the father. But that in itself is the question. What is that? Well, this is a question. Mi alima kiyad avia l'shavia shliach. Is she strong enough? How strong is the hand? Does she have like an independent hand that she can do whatever the father can do with the hand? Or no, she's just the receiving end of the hand, not that she can also nominate a shliach to act. Amalei said, Nachman answered, Ein oisa shliach. He does not have the capacity to appoint a shliach. So now we're going to ask a question on Rab Nachman. We're going to try to prove that a ketana sort of can receive the get on her own, and and so on and so forth. It goes as follows: Esave, without her father's consent. Esave asked a question. I'll ask you a question. Nachman says, Ketana Shomri is Kabbalah Giti. If a Ketana says, we're looking more Giti. If a Ketana says, I want you to receive the get on my behalf, ain't a get. A Ketana cannot appoint a Shliach. As you get until the get comes to hand. Seems to me the only problem is the fact that she's a Ketana. Had she been a Naira and she would have asked somebody, do me a favor, you be my Shliach and be a Shliach like Kabbalah, would have been effective. You'd have Nachman just said that the Naira does not have the capacity to appoint a Shliach. It seems clearly that only a Ketana does not have the capacity to appoint a Shliach because she's a Ketana, nothing with Gittin. But a Naira could. She's a Yisayma. Oh, there's no question the Naira has no father. Remember, the problem is the father is one in control. But if there's no father, then obviously she's able to see her own get. She's a Naira. That's what the Mishnah is talking about there. But a Ketana even then can't. Why not? Because she cannot appoint a shliach. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? How can you tell me she's talking about Yisayma? It says in the next case over there in that very mission, it says, if the father says to the shliach, but I want you not to be a shliach l'haylacha, I want you to be shliach kabbalah. No, the moment I place the get in your hand, I want my daughter to be divorced. So the father appointed shliach kabbalah. If the father wants to change his mind, too late. The moment he gave it to this shliach and he said, "I want you to act like a Kabbalah," the girl is free. She's no longer married. Now the question is very simple. What's the problem? Sorry, the moment the father says, "Go receive from the husband the get and be the shliach Kabbalah the woman," you just said we're talking about a yisayim. Where's his father coming in? We're not talking about a girl with Yisrael, an ordinary girl, and it seems clearly the father can appoint a shliach Kabbalah on her behalf, that this shliach should go to the husband and pick up the get. But the first part of the Mishnah says that Tana can, but a Naida seems could. No problem. The first part of the Mishnah is talking about Yisayma, the second part is talking about that she has no that she has a father. And this is how you read the Mishnah. A few words are missing. Tana, the first part of the Mishnah Yisayma, he's Kabbalah Gita the other. She cannot appoint a Shliach, Naida, but if she read Naida is a get, that's talking about she's an orphan. Therefore she can accept the get, she can appoint a Shliach. This whole talking about when she's an orphan. If she does have a father, and the father appoints a shliach kabbalah on her behalf, go ahead and mekabel. The girl, the naida can never appoint a shliach, but if the father can appoint, the chiddush is the father can appoint a shliach kabbalah, not just a shliach halacha. Say, here, I want you to go to the chassan and bring it to deliver it to my daughter. The husband cannot, and if the husband wants to change his mind, the husband can no longer change his mind because the moment the shliach received the get, he is a kabbalah for the girl, for the wife, and the wife is already divorced. Okay. Itmar, we learned Tana. What happened to Tana, a young girl? We said before that Tana cannot receive Kiddushin. The father is the one who receives Kiddushin according to everybody. The whole argument is about a naira, but everyone agrees when it comes to Tana, the father is the one who received Kiddushin. Whatever she did, she received Kiddushin. Now, when the father found out, whatever it is, if he rejects it straight out of hand, don't talk about it. There's no Kiddushin. What happened when the father was quiet? He was quiet for a while. What happens then? What he does afterward doesn't matter. The question is at that moment. Tana, maybe it's a tacit agreement, or maybe he finds it so objectionable doesn't even care to give an opinion. Tana Shmuel says it's questionable. What exactly? How do we understand the father's silence? So therefore, tzricha get. On the one hand, you do need a get because maybe the father is agreeing to it, so therefore she is, retrospectively engaged. On the other hand, could be the father is not agreeable, and therefore she's not engaged. But for that, you need a miyun. Miyun means that she has to say, I'm going to manage to walk out. Now, why do you need miyun? If the father doesn't agree either get or nothing. So the Gemara will say, does this make sense? If a get, I mean that she was married, then lama miyun. And miyun, and if you tell me another, she's not married, but whatever it is going through the shara, then lama get. What's going on here? They said to him, you have a good question. You know what? Ubeidina Bikfari. You know, Marukva and his Bezin is not far from here. Let's go ask him. But what they did was, they decided the last minute, instead of saying to Marukva, they went straight to Rav, who was who was a good friend of Shmuel and his colleague. But what they did was, they knew that Rav was a good friend of Shmuel, so Rav might defend Shmuel. So they did was they swapped it around. Pretty dirty here, pretty cunning. Avchu, they swapped around. That what Karna said was Shmuel said, and what Shmuel said, Karna said. Shekula Gamelav. They wanted to see if Rav will defend Shmuel, which then we'll know that Karna is right. Amalu Alakim. And Rav was not Mispol, he's I swear. Tzricha get what tzricha mean. That you need a get, you need mean, thinking that Karna is the one who said it. He said, well, Karna is right. You need a get, need mean. And the Chaslei Lezare, the Abba bar Abba, the name of and Chaslei Sholem for the son of Abba, because the father of Shmuel was called Abu, Shmuel was called, his name is Abba, who's, I guess his father was named Abba as well. And Chaslei Sholem for the child of Abba bar Abba to say that you don't need a mean just to get. So much of a time of mind to explain yourself. What's going on here? You know why you get Kiddushin? Maybe the father was quiet, but he's agreeable. No, he was agreeable. He's engaged retrospectively. Oh, retroactively. So why Sichamin? So why didn't mean? Because Shemalain starts of Kiddushin. Maybe the father didn't agree. If the father didn't agree, there was no Kiddushin. So what's the problem? But the problem is you're giving her a get. If you're giving her a get, people are going to think, that there's no longer any relationship between her and the husband, right? The ex-husband. So now the ex-husband is allowed to marry her sister. But we don't know. Maybe we're not sure what the father did. So we therefore, by saying have me, and people realize, they get to that absolute. Could be they were married. It could be that there was some kind of a Kiddushin here. Could be there wasn't some kind of Kiddushin. And therefore, you cannot marry the sister. The Yomer ain't Kiddushin Taish B'Chaysa. They'll think that they'll say this, that there was a get, so you cannot marry the sister of your grusha, right? So they'll say there was a get, and therefore if the husband gives Kiddushin to this grusha, to the sister of the grusha, they'll say nothing happened. But really, maybe there was no get, and therefore the Kiddushin to the sister was a valid Kiddushin. And a churba will come out of this. She'll think they're not married, and she'll marry somebody else, and she's a married woman. Be mamzeh and everything else. So therefore, by saying you have to have a mian, they'll say, so maybe they weren't married. It's only a mian. Mian was never married in the first place. So then, if the ex-husband gives Kiddushin to the sister of this girl, they're going to make her receive a get. That's why, to prevent a problem. Rav Nachman said, you're right, but you know when? This only applies when are we chayshes? Maybe the father's in agreement. If they were talking already about the shidduch, the proposal came up and the father was digesting it and maybe was mulling it over. So then there's a possibility the father agrees, but they never had any talk. The girl got Kiddushin somewhere and the father says nothing. Obviously, he objects to it. He doesn't bother even to it. It's a waste of time, a waste of space. Ula, however, says afilu miyan ain't tzricha. Ula says that you don't need any miyan whatsoever. In other words, he says just a get and that's it. Says the Gemara, says he did nothing. Nothing happened here. If the father didn't agree, you don't even forget about get. You don't even need me. You did nothing. Says Gemara, even though they were discussing the shidduchim, you don't even not worry that maybe the father was in agreement and maybe he was a Kiddushin. The father is happy with the girl what she did. What do you mean? Even you're saying that you don't need nothing, not a me and not a get, nothing else. How can that be? Because you're saying my siktan is worthless. How can it be? So Gemara says, "Man the masnaha, le masnaha." So Gemara is saying no. That Ula, Ula argues on the whole thing here. He doesn't agree with Rab and Shmuel who said only Bashaduchim. Ula disagrees with the whole thing. Or you get Amri Amar Ula Tana Sheniskacha Shaloi Ladas Avir. Ula said that what do you call it? That Ula said that Tana Sheniskacha Shaloi Avir, but the father was not aware of it. Afilu miyan ain't tzricha. Ula says that it's a separate thing altogether. He's not arguing Rab and Shmuel. And the way Rashi learns, there's no difference, shidduch, not that he's arguing with Rabbi Shmuel. He's saying it didn't have lastamazeh. He's saying it, I don't care to talk about it, not to talk about it. There's no question. Taish learns a little differently. He learns that that Ula is only talking about a din where loy shitchu. So he's not even arguing. Ikad Amri is saying that he's not discussing at all Rabbi Shmuel's case. They're talking about a case where you talk about Shidduchim, that there's a possibility they agree. All talking about a case was Stam. The girl came home one day, I got engaged to this person there. So the Gemara, he's mostly Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana asked a question like this. We learned in Gemara Yevamis, there are 15 cases of, let's say, Reuben is married to two women. And if he dies without children, the wives have to marry Shimon. One of them has to marry Shimon. Another one then is set free. What happens if these two women, one of them is forbidden to Shimon? One of the forbidden, let's say Shimon's sister on the mother's side, which was Reuben. And one of them was the daughter. If Shimon's daughter was married to Reuben, then she obviously cannot marry Shimon if Reuben dies. So the tzara also is free. Right? But what happens if the one that is forbidden to Shimon died or was divorced right before Reuben died? So all we focus on is the moment of Reuben's death. When Reuben died, he only had one wife or two, or whatever it is, but none of them were a problem with Shimon. Doesn't matter if for 10 years he was married to somebody else, who was a problem to Shimon. We ignore that. And one of the cases is a daughter. And it says in that case that if she was Memayan, she decided to walk out. But Shimon is alive. That's what we're talking about. Shimon's alive, he has to marry. And yet somehow another daughter made a mian. How is it possible if Shimon was alive and he married his daughter off to Ruvain, that all she doesn't need a get, she just needs a mian? How do you find a case of mian? Mian usually is when the father is no longer alive and the mother or the brothers or the siblings marry her off. So it's not really a marriage, so you need mian by Tanya 12. How does that work? It says, Motav Kana. The Kulan, he makes a mian in the Garsha, Shinim, to Islands, and all of these other women that were forbidden, let's say, to Shimon. If they died, or they walked out of the marriage, or they were divorced, or it turned out to be an island if she never married in the first place, she was barren. So the same mutaras. The co-wife, when Reuben died, the one that was forbidden was no longer the wife, so therefore the co-wife has to marry Shimon. Now the Kachan, how in the world is the daughter of Shimon, who's married to Reuben, can she just walk out with a man? Ilem the Kachavia, if the father, Shimon, got her engaged, sagila. It's enough just to walk out by saying, I'm not interested. Get my aliyah boy. She needs a divorce. What's the case of me? Elalava must be the kacha nafsha, that she must have got herself engaged. Uktani the boy mean. And you need a man. So we see clearly from here that if she got herself engaged without her father's knowledge, still something happened. She needs a man. In other words, you don't need a get, like Shmuel said in the Rav, you need a get. You don't need a get. All you need is mean. Because if you need a get as well, what do you tell what's the Mishnah saying mean? It seems from here that if she did it on her own and her father, wasn't aware, all you need is a mean. Says the Gemara, he asked, it's a question to everybody. He asked it and he answered. You know what we're talking about here? What happened here was that the father, Shimon married up to somebody. She was already married. She had a long life history, even though she's under 12 years old. She was already married to somebody else, and then she got divorced. The moment the father marries her off to somebody else, and had Edison and the Suyan, she's totally married, the father loses total control. So therefore, in that case there, she's still a Tana. So she doesn't need her father's consent in that case. She's totally independent. That's what we're talking about. Exactly. So now if she goes ahead at the age of 8, this has happened when she was 5, 6, and she had to get. Comes the age of 8, she wants to get married. The father no longer has any control over her, but she's a Tana. In that case there, she's not really married, but a man you need. That's what we're talking about here. There's no question at all. There's a question. It says, we had an argument if you can sell your daughter as a maid to a relative, because part of the union of a maid is that she should be able to get married to the master. But a relative that's an erba, you cannot get married. So can you sell your daughter when you're desperate and you need money? Can you sell it to a close relative, to a brother? So we said you can. Rabbi Elazar said yes, you can, because he learns from a pasuk. If you sell your daughter as a maid, sometimes the only role she'll play is being a maid, nothing to do with anything else. But the Shavin, they all agree. We had this. You're allowed to sell her. Let's say the daughter is a widow already. You're allowed to sell to Kohen Gadol. Forbidden to marry, but the Eved Chayav Elavin is Kiddushin. Even though there's an Avera involved, but they could get married. Or Grusha, who's going to hedge it? Let's say your daughter was divorcee and you're selling it to a Kohen, you can. Even though they shouldn't get married to each other, but technically they do, there's a Kiddushin there. Now, the case of a widow to a Kohen Gadol. How is that possible? If you tell me you're going to give me this Now what? You're going to tell me the same answer you gave before. Talking about the father married her off, and then she got divorced. So now she's a widow, and the father wants to sell her. We have a rule that once that that the father actually married her off. Me matzi mazmila. How can he sell her as a maid? We learned that just like he cannot marry her off a second time after he married once because it's totally out of his control. Same thing is with slavery. He cannot sell her as an anymore because out of his control. Must be talking about that she was Makadish herself, and the father can still sell her. I mean, the father still control. But she went ahead and Makadish herself without the father consent, and we see clearly from here the Kokoda Almana, and we're calling her a widow. And we're calling her a widow. Says the game. So we see that she has the ability to marry herself off. Not like you said before that it's questionable. You know what we're talking about here? We're talking about the Kiddushin of Yield, which is when you marry, they sell your daughter as a maid. She should be marrying her master. But we're talking about according to the opinion that says, according to one opinion we had, the Chachamim, that the money that the master gives to buy the slave is also the money used for Kiddushin. Okay, that means the father married off. But here we're talking about according to Rabbi Yossi, who says that Moed Hashem is lavli Kiddushin. So in other words, if the master decides to marry her a year into her servitude, it has nothing to do with the father. He's giving new money, and that money goes to her. So here you have a case where the girl therefore got married if the father never married her off before. And what happened was she became a widow from that. She became a widow from that. And it's not considered the father because the father did not receive any money for this Kiddushin. The money that he received, the money he received, according to Yehuda, was for being a servant, not for marriage. And therefore, now that her master died, went back home, he can sell her to an almana. If she's now an almana, she can sell to a kohen gadol. So we asked the question: how can you sell to kohen gadol? How can it be another case of if in fact the father is still in control, and the father can give her off as how can she be a widow from her master? A widow from her master, the father can't sell her again. Yes, he can, because according to basically Yehuda, the Kiddushin was not the father. The father cannot marry her off and then sell her as a slave. The father never married her off; he sold her as a slave. And you can sell her again as a slave. They'll leave it at Yehuda. Dama Moise the Shain is loud the Kiddushin. The money was like him for Kiddushin. We'll stop over tomorrow, Mr. Hashem.